Young laundress, barely noticed by anyone, is hiding something in her coat that could destroy powerful men. When a detective reads the secret note she thought no one would ever see, everything changes, especially for her. What did the note say? And why is she so afraid? Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. Boston, Massachusetts, November 1895. The rain fell in cold sheets against the cobblestones of Beacon Hill, turning the gaslit streets into rivers of amber light and shadow. Detective James Montgomery pulled his wool coat tighter as he stepped down from the police carriage, his tall frame cutting a sharp silhouette against the glow of the street lamps. At 32 years of age, he had seen enough of Boston's underbelly to know that darkness wore many faces, but tonight felt different somehow, heavier with an unease he could not name. The Sanders mansion loomed before him, its Victorian facade imposing even in the downpour. 3 stories of red brick and white trim, with tall windows that now blazed with light as servants rushed about inside. James had been summoned here by telegram less than an hour ago. A theft, they said. Valuable documents missing from the study of Richard Sanders, one of Boston's most prominent shipping magnates. James climbed the stone steps and was met at the door by the butler, a stern-faced man in his 60s who introduced himself as Mr. Whitmore. The interior of the mansion was exactly as James had expected. Polished mahogany, crystal chandeliers, Persian rugs that likely cost more than most men earned in a year. Wealth surrounded him, cold and untouchable. Mr. Sanders is waiting for you in his study, Detective, Whitmore said, his voice clipped and formal. This way, please. They walked through a long corridor lined with oil paintings of stern ancestors, their painted eyes seeming to follow James as he passed. He had grown up in the working-class neighborhoods near the harbor, where his father had worked the docks until his back gave out. These gilded halls were as foreign to him as a palace, yet he moved through them with quiet confidence, his keen gray eyes taking in every detail. The study was a room of dark wood and leather, shelves packed with leather-bound volumes that James suspected had never been read. Behind a massive oak desk sat Richard Sanders himself, a man of perhaps 55 with silver hair and the kind of face that had forgotten how to smile. Standing beside him was a younger man, his son perhaps, with the same hard features and expensive suit. Detective Montgomery, Sanders said, not rising from his seat. You took your time. James removed his hat, water dripping onto the expensive carpet. The rain slows traffic, Mr. Sanders. Now, what exactly has been stolen? Sanders gestured impatiently to the younger man. My son Charles will explain. I have better things to do than repeat myself to the police. Charles Sanders stepped forward, his eyes cold as he assessed James. 3 days ago, a set of shipping contracts disappeared from this very desk. Contracts worth a considerable sum, containing information that could damage our business interests if they fell into the wrong hands. Who has access to this room? James asked, withdrawing a small notebook from his coat pocket. The family, of course, Charles replied. My father, myself, my sister Catherine when she visits. The servants are not permitted to enter except for cleaning, and never alone. I'll need to speak with each of them, James said, making notes. The servants as well. Richard Sanders slammed his hand on the desk. You will not disrupt my household with your interrogations, Detective. We called you here to catch the thief, not to harass innocent people. James met the older man's glare without flinching. With respect, sir, if you want your documents recovered, I need to do my job. That means speaking with everyone who might have information. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut when the door opened and Whitmore reappeared. Excuse me, sir, but shall I have the new laundress come in to clean? She's finished with the linens. The new laundress? James asked, his attention sharpening. How new? Whitmore looked uncomfortable. She was hired 4 days ago, Detective. The previous girl left without notice. James exchanged a glance with Charles Sanders. I'd like to speak with her first, if you don't mind. Richard Sanders waved a dismissive hand. Fine, but make it quick. I won't have you wasting the entire evening on the help. Whitmore left and returned moments later with a young woman who kept her eyes on the floor as she entered. She was small, perhaps 5 feet and 3 inches tall, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun beneath her white cap. Her gray dress was plain and worn, the uniform of domestic service. But it was her posture that caught James's attention, the way she held herself so carefully still, as if trying to take up as little space as possible, to be as invisible as her poverty demanded. "Your name?" James asked gently, trying to catch her eye. "Rosalind Harper, sir." Her voice was barely above a whisper, soft with an accent that spoke of rural origins, perhaps somewhere in the Midwest. She still had not looked up. "Miss Harper, you were hired 4 days ago." "Yes, sir." "And where did you work before this?" For the first time, she hesitated, her hands red and chapped from harsh soap twisted in her apron. I worked at a textile mill, sir, in Lawrence. Before that, a farm in Ohio." "Why did you leave the mill?" "It closed, sir. Many of us lost our positions." James studied her carefully. She was perhaps 24 or 25, though hardship might have aged her beyond her years. There was something delicate about her features, a fragile beauty that poverty and labor had not quite erased. Her hands trembled slightly, and he wondered if it was from cold or fear. "Have you been in this study before, Miss Harper?" "Only to clean, sir, with Mrs. Henshaw, the head housekeeper. She doesn't let any of us in alone." "And you've seen nothing unusual? No one acting strangely?" She shook her head, still staring at the carpet. "No, sir. I keep to my work." "I don't pry into the family's business." Charles Sanders snorted. "Of course she says that. They all do." James shot him a sharp look before turning back to Rosalind. "Thank you, Miss Harper. That will be all for now, but I may need to speak with you again." She curtsied quickly and turned to leave, moving with the quiet efficiency of someone who had learned to be invisible. As she reached the door, something slipped from the pocket of her dress, a small piece of paper that fluttered to the floor. She froze, her face going pale. "Miss Harper," James said, crossing the room in 3 long strides. "You dropped something." He bent to retrieve it before she could react, and as his fingers closed around the paper, he saw her eyes for the first time. They were remarkable, a deep blue-green like the ocean on a stormy day, and in them he saw not guilt, but something else entirely. Terror, and beneath it, a desperate plea he could not quite understand. The paper was folded small, barely larger than his thumb. James opened it, aware that everyone in the room was watching. The handwriting was cramped and hurried, the ink smudged in places. "Please," it read, "I'm in terrible danger. He will kill me if he finds me. I have nowhere else to go. God help me. R.H." The room fell silent. James looked up at Rosalind Harper, who had gone white as death, her slight frame swaying as if she might faint. Her eyes were wide with fear, locked on his face, and in that moment, James Montgomery knew with absolute certainty that whatever had brought him to this mansion tonight, it was not about stolen contracts. "Miss Harper," he said quietly, his voice gentle despite the pounding of his heart, "I think you and I need to have a private conversation." Richard Sanders surged to his feet. "Now see here, detective, if that girl is involved in this theft—" "Mr. Sanders," James interrupted, his tone brooking no argument as he slipped the note into his pocket. "I will conduct this investigation as I see fit. Miss Harper, please come with me." She looked as if she might bolt, her eyes darting to the door like a trapped animal seeking escape. But something in James's expression must have reached her, some promise of protection or understanding, because after a long, trembling moment, she gave a small nod. "Whitmore," James said, "is there a room where Miss Harper and I might speak privately?" The butler, looking thoroughly scandalized, led them to a small parlor off the main hall. It was a feminine room, decorated in shades of rose and cream, with a fire burning low in the grate. James waited until Whitmore had closed the door before turning to face Rosalind Harper. She stood near the window, as far from him as the room would allow, her arms wrapped around herself as if to hold her body together. The firelight caught her face, revealing features that were indeed lovely despite the exhaustion that shadowed them. High cheekbones, a delicate nose, lips pressed thin with fear. But it was her eyes that held him, those extraordinary eyes that had seen too much suffering for one so young. "Miss Harper," James began, keeping his voice low and calm, "I need you to understand something. I am not here to hurt you. Whatever you're running from, whatever danger you're in, I want to help. But I cannot do that unless you trust me." She said nothing, only watched him with the wary stillness of prey before a predator. James withdrew the note from his pocket and held it up. "You wrote this. The initials match your name. R.H. Rosalind Harper." He paused, letting that sink in. "Who wants to kill you?" Her breath caught, and for a moment he thought she would cry. But she fought it back with visible effort. lifting her chin with a pride that seemed at odds with her station. "I cannot tell you. Cannot or will not. It makes no difference, detective. If I speak, I am as good as dead." James took a step closer, moving slowly so as not to frighten her further. "Miss Harper, Rosalind, please, look at me." When she finally did, he continued, "I have been with the Boston Police Department for 8 years. Before that, I worked as a Pinkerton agent. I have seen terrible things, helped people in situations that seemed hopeless. Whatever you are facing, you do not have to face it alone." Something in her expression cracked then, a hairline fracture in the wall she had built around herself. "You do not understand. He has money, power, connections. Men like him do not answer to the law. They are the law." "Who is he?" She turned away, pressing her fingers to her temples. "I should never have come here. It was foolish to think I could hide in plain sight. He will find me. He always finds them." "Them?" James's detective instincts sharpened. "There are others?" Rosalind laughed, a bitter sound without humor. "Oh yes, detective. Others who thought they could escape. Others who tried to tell someone to seek help. They are all gone now. Disappeared like smoke, and no one asks questions because no one cares about girls like us. We are poor, invisible. We do not matter." The rawness of her words struck James like a physical blow. He had always known that his city had two faces: the gleaming facade of wealth and progress, and the dark underbelly where people suffered and died without notice. But hearing it spoken so plainly, seeing the resignation in this young woman's eyes, filled him with a fury he struggled to contain. "You matter to me," he said, and meant it with an intensity that surprised him. "Miss Harper, I give you my word as a gentleman, and as an officer of the law, I will not let anyone hurt you. But you must help me understand what we are facing." She turned back to him, and in the firelight, tears glimmered unshed in her eyes. For a long moment she searched his face, looking for something he hoped she would find. Finally she spoke, her voice barely audible. "His name is Victor Thornwood." The name sent a chill through James. Victor Thornwood was known throughout Boston, a railroad tycoon whose fortune rivaled that of the Vanderbilts. He owned half the rail lines in New England and had political connections that reached all the way to Washington. If Rosalind Harper had indeed made an enemy of such a man, she was right to be terrified. "What did he do to you?" James asked quietly. Rosalind's hands trembled as she gripped the back of a velvet chair, her knuckles white against the rose-colored fabric. The firelight cast dancing shadows across her pale face, and for a moment, James thought she might refuse to answer. But then she drew a shaky breath and began to speak, her voice low and haunted. "I was not always a laundress, Detective Montgomery. 2 years ago I worked as a seamstress in a respectable shop on Newbury Street. We made dresses for wealthy ladies, beautiful gowns of silk and lace. I was good at my work, quick with a needle, and the shop owner, Mrs. Caldwell, she trusted me with the finest fabrics." She paused, her eyes distant with memory. James remained silent, giving her space to tell her story in her own time. One day, Mr. Thornwood's daughter came into the shop, Miss Lydia Thornwood. She was perhaps 19, very beautiful, very particular about her clothes. She ordered a ball gown for some society event, emerald green silk with black lace overlay. I was assigned to work on it. Rosalind moved to the window, staring out at the rain-soaked night. The gown took weeks to complete. Miss Thornwood came for fittings, and sometimes her father accompanied her. He was always polite, charming even. But there was something in the way he looked at us girls, something that made my skin crawl. Mrs. Caldwell noticed it too, and she made sure we were never alone with him. James watched her carefully, noting the way her shoulders tensed at the memory. Outside, the rain continued its relentless assault on the windows, the wind howling like a living thing. Then one evening I was working late to finish the gown. Mrs. Caldwell had gone home, trusting me to lock up. I thought I was alone. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper, but I was not. Mr. Thornwood had come back saying he wanted to see the progress on his daughter's dress. I showed it to him, thinking nothing of it. That was my mistake. She turned from the window, and James saw tears streaming down her face now, though her voice remained steady. He cornered me in the back room, said he had been watching me, that he fancied girls with my particular look. He said he could make me rich, set me up in a fine apartment, dress me in silks. All I had to do was be kind to him. She spat the last words like poison. When I refused, when I tried to leave, he grabbed me. His hands were everywhere, tearing at my clothes. I fought him, detective. I fought with everything I had. James felt his jaw clench, a cold rage building in his chest. How did you escape? There was a pair of sewing scissors on the table. I managed to reach them and I struck him with them across the face. Not deep, but enough to make him bleed. Enough to shock him into releasing me. I ran. I ran into the night wearing nothing but my torn dress and apron, and I did not stop running until my lungs burned and my feet bled. She wiped her eyes with shaking hands. The next day, Mrs. Caldwell's shop was visited by the police. They said there had been a robbery, that I was the prime suspect. They said I had stolen money from the cash box and valuable fabric. Mr. Thornwood had paid them to say this. I am certain of it. Mrs. Caldwell, God rest her kind soul. She did not believe it. But what could she do? She had to let me go, or risk her business being destroyed. And then? James prompted gently. Then I became invisible, detective. I could not get another position as a seamstress, not with such accusations hanging over me. I had no family, no one to turn to. I took whatever work I could find, scrubbing floors, washing dishes in cheap restaurants, working in the mills. I moved from place to place, never staying long, always afraid that he would find me. Rosalind crossed to the fireplace, holding her hands out to the warmth as if she might never be warm again. But it was not just fear for myself that kept me moving. I began to hear stories, whispers among the working girls, stories of other young women who had caught Mr. Thornwood's attention, who had refused him or tried to expose his behavior. These women disappeared, detective. They vanished without a trace, and no one asked questions because they were nobody. Factory girls, maids, shop assistants, invisible. James pulled out his notebook, his mind racing. Do you remember any names? 3 that I know for certain. Sarah Brennan, she worked at a hat shop. Margaret O'Connor, a maid in a hotel. And Anna Kowalski, who worked at the same mill I did in Lawrence. All 3 rejected his advances. All 3 disappeared within weeks. Did you report this to anyone? Rosalind turned to him with a look that was equal parts bitterness and disbelief. Reported to whom? The police he pays? The newspapers owned by his friends? The judges who dine at his table? I told you, detective, men like Victor Thornwood are above the law. They write their own rules, and people like me are just insects to be crushed beneath their boots. James closed his notebook and met her gaze directly. Not anymore, Miss Harper. You have told me, and I am not owned by anyone. I will investigate these disappearances, and if Victor Thornwood is responsible, I will see him brought to justice, no matter how powerful he thinks he is. She studied him for a long moment, and James could see the war being fought behind her extraordinary eyes. Hope, struggling against the weight of bitter experience. Finally, she shook her head sadly. You are a good man, Detective Montgomery. I can see that. But you do not understand what you are up against. Thornwood has destroyed men better connected than you for far less. Then let me prove you wrong, James said, moving closer to her. But first, I need to know, why did you come to work here, at the Sanders mansion? Was it just coincidence, or is there a connection? Rosalind's expression shifted, becoming cautious again. There is a connection, though I did not understand its full significance until recently. Richard Sanders and Victor Thornwood are business partners. They have investments together, shipping contracts tied to Thornwood's rail lines. I took this position because I thought it might be a way to find evidence against Thornwood, something concrete that could prove his crimes. But I found something else instead. James felt his pulse quicken. The stolen contracts. She nodded slowly. They were not stolen, Detective. I took them, but not for money or spite. I took them because buried among all that business language was something else. Coded references to shipments, payments, destinations that made no sense in the context of legitimate trade. I believe Thornwood and Sanders are involved in something illegal, something beyond even what Thornwood has done to those poor girls. What kind of illegal activity? I am not certain. The language is carefully obscured, but there are mentions of special cargo arriving on specific ships, of payments to customs officials, of warehouses that do not appear on any official records. It smells of smuggling, Detective, or something worse. James's mind raced through the possibilities. If Rosalind was right, if Sanders and Thornwood were using their legitimate businesses as cover for criminal enterprise, it could explain many things. It might also provide the leverage needed to bring Thornwood down. Where are the contracts now? he asked. Rosalind hesitated, then reached into the pocket of her dress and withdrew a small key. There is a locker at South Station, number 147. I hid the documents there before I realized Sanders had discovered they were missing. I thought if I was caught, at least they would not find the evidence on me. James took the key, their fingers brushing briefly. The touch was electric, unexpected, and he saw from her widened eyes that she had felt it too. For a moment neither of them moved, caught in that strange instant of connection. Then Rosalind pulled back, wrapping her arms around herself once more. "You should know something else, Detective," she said quietly. "When I took those contracts, I also found a letter. It was addressed to Sanders from Thornwood, written in his own hand. In it, Thornwood mentioned me by name. He told Sanders to watch for a young woman matching my description, that I was dangerous and needed to be detained if I appeared anywhere near their business interests. He offered a substantial reward for information leading to my capture. Sanders knows who you are?" "Not yet. The letter was dated 3 weeks ago, before I applied for this position. I used a false reference and changed my appearance as much as I could. But it is only a matter of time before he realizes." Whitmore has already started looking at me strangely. James felt the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. Rosalind Harper was in immediate danger, trapped in the household of a man who had been ordered to hand her over to her tormentor. The stolen contracts, the missing women, the coded business dealings, they were all pieces of a puzzle that was rapidly taking shape. "You cannot stay here," he said firmly. "It is not safe. I have nowhere else to go. You will come with me. I have rooms in the North End, nothing fancy, but there is a spare bedroom. My landlady, Mrs. O'Brien, is discreet and kind. You will be safe there while I investigate further." Rosalind looked at him with such surprise that James realized she had probably expected him to abandon her to her fate, as so many others had. "You would do that? Risk your reputation, your position, for someone like me? Someone like you?" James repeated, his voice soft but intense. "Miss Harper, you are one of the bravest people I have ever met. You have survived horrors that would break most men, and instead of surrendering to despair, you have gathered evidence against your enemies at great personal risk. You are not nobody. You are not invisible, and I will not leave you to face this alone." The tears came then, flowing freely down her face as the armor she had built around herself finally cracked. She pressed her hands to her mouth, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. James wanted to comfort her, to offer some physical reassurance, but he held back, sensing that she needed this release more than she needed his touch. When the storm of emotion finally passed, Rosalind wiped her eyes and looked at him with something like wonder. "I do not even know why you believe me. You have only my word against that of powerful men." "I believe you because I see the truth in your eyes," James said simply, "and because I have learned to recognize when someone is lying to me. You are not lying, Miss Harper. You are terrified, and you have every right to be. But you are also honest and brave, and those qualities are worth more to me than all the wealth and power in Boston." A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Whitmore's voice called through the wood. "Detective Montgomery, Mr. Sanders is asking how much longer you will be. He has an engagement this evening." James moved to the door and opened it just wide enough to speak to the butler. "Please inform Mr. Sanders that my initial investigation is complete for tonight. I will return tomorrow to continue my inquiries. Also, I will be escorting Miss Harper home, as she is feeling unwell and should not travel alone in this weather." Whitmore's eyebrows rose nearly to his hairline. "Sir, I am not certain that is appropriate. Nevertheless, that is what will happen," James said with quiet authority. "Please have someone fetch Miss Harper's coat and any personal belongings she may have here." The butler withdrew with obvious disapproval, and James turned back to Rosalind. She had composed herself somewhat, though her eyes were still red from crying. In the firelight, with her face softened by vulnerability, she was breathtakingly beautiful, and James felt something shift in his chest, a protective tenderness that went beyond professional duty. "Are you ready?" he asked gently. She nodded, smoothing her dress with trembling hands. "Detective Montgomery, I do not know how to thank you." "James," he said. "My name is James, and you do not need to thank me, Rosalind. We are going to solve this together, you and I. We are going to find out what happened to those missing women, expose whatever criminal enterprise Sanders and Thornwood are running, and ensure that you are safe. I promise you this. A maid appeared with Rosalind's worn wool coat and a small cloth bag that apparently contained all her worldly possessions. James helped her into the coat, noting how thin and inadequate it was against the November cold. He made a mental note to remedy that as soon as possible. They left the mansion through the servants' entrance at James's insistence, avoiding Sanders and his son. The rain had lessened to a steady drizzle, and James's carriage waited in the alley behind the house. He helped Rosalind inside, then instructed his driver to take them to his lodgings on Hanover Street. As the carriage rolled through the wet streets, James watched Rosalind from the opposite seat. She sat very still, her hands folded in her lap, staring out at the passing lights. The gas lamps turned the raindrops on the window into liquid gold, casting shifting patterns across her face. "What are you thinking?" he asked after a while. She turned to him, and in the dim light of the carriage, her eyes were luminous. "I am thinking that for the first time in 2 years, I feel something other than fear. I am not certain what to call it. Hope, perhaps, or simply the absence of complete despair. I would like to give you more than just the absence of despair," James said quietly. "I would like to give you justice and safety, and the chance to live without looking over your shoulder. That would be a precious gift indeed." They fell silent again, but it was a comfortable silence now, charged with an understanding that had developed between them. James found himself intensely aware of her presence, of the subtle scent of lavender soap that clung to her despite the harsh work she did, of the way the dim light caught in her dark hair. When they arrived at his lodgings, a modest 3-story brick building in the heart of the Italian North End, James helped her down from the carriage and guided her inside. Mrs. O'Brien, a plump Irish widow with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner, met them in the entrance hall. "Mrs. O'Brien," James said, "this is Miss Rosalind Harper. She is in need of safe lodging for a few days, possibly longer. She will take the spare room on my floor, and I would be grateful if you could provide her with some supper and anything else she might need." Mrs. O'Brien looked from James to Rosalind and back again, her shrewd eyes missing nothing. But whatever she saw seemed to satisfy her, because she nodded and took Rosalind's arm with maternal gentleness. "Of course, Detective. Come along, dear. You look half frozen. We will get some hot soup in you and a warm bed. Mr. Montgomery keeps respectable hours, and this is a respectable house, so you need not worry about your reputation." As Mrs. O'Brien led Rosalind toward the stairs, the young woman turned back to look at James. In her eyes, he saw gratitude and something else, something fragile and new that made his heart beat faster. "Good night, James," she said softly. "Good night, Rosalind. Rest well. Tomorrow we begin setting things right." He watched until she disappeared up the stairs, then went to his own rooms to plan his next moves. The night was far from over, and he had much to do. The morning broke cold and gray over Boston, the previous night's rain leaving the streets slick and glistening. James had barely slept, spending most of the night poring over his notes and formulating a plan of action. By the time dawn lightened his window, he had mapped out a strategy that was bold, perhaps even reckless, but it was the only path he could see that might bring Victor Thornwood to justice while keeping Rosalind safe. A soft knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called, expecting Mrs. O'Brien with his morning coffee. Instead, Rosalind entered, carrying a tray with 2 cups and a pot of steaming coffee. She had changed from her gray servant's dress into a simple blue day dress that Mrs. O'Brien must have lent her. The color brought out the extraordinary shade of her eyes, and her dark hair was arranged in a soft style that framed her face. She looked rested, though still wary, like a deer that had found temporary sanctuary but remained alert to danger. "Mrs. O'Brien thought you might need this," she said, setting the tray on his desk. "She also insisted that I eat a proper breakfast. I cannot remember the last time someone showed me such kindness without expecting anything in return." James rose from his chair, suddenly aware of how disheveled he must look after his sleepless night. "How did you rest?" "Better than I have in months. Your Mrs. O'Brien is a treasure. She sat with me last night until I fell asleep, talking about her late husband and her children in Ireland. It reminded me of my own mother before she passed." "I am glad," James said, pouring coffee for both of them. "You needed the rest. Today will be challenging." Rosalind accepted the cup he offered, their fingers brushing again in that same electric way. This time, neither pulled away immediately, and James felt the connection deepen. a spark of something that transcended their desperate circumstances. Finally, Rosalind stepped back, wrapping both hands around her cup as if seeking its warmth. "What is your plan?" she asked, settling into the chair opposite his desk. James took a long drink of coffee, gathering his thoughts. "First, I need to retrieve those contracts from South Station and examine them thoroughly. If they contain evidence of smuggling or other criminal activity, that gives us leverage. Second, I need to investigate the disappearances of the women you mentioned, Sarah Brennan, Margaret O'Connor, and Anna Kowalski. If I can establish a pattern, if I can find witnesses or evidence linking Thornwood to their vanishing, it strengthens our case significantly. And what of Mr. Sanders? He will realize soon that I am gone, if he has not already. Let him realize it. In fact, I am counting on it. When Sanders discovers that both you and the contracts are missing, he will panic. Panicked men make mistakes, and they reach out to their partners for help. I am betting that Sanders will contact Thornwood, and when he does, we will be watching." Rosalind set down her cup, her expression troubled. "James, you are talking about surveillance of two of the most powerful men in Boston, the resources that would require, the authorization you would need from your superiors. How can you possibly accomplish this without them interfering?" It was a fair question, and James had wrestled with it all night. "I cannot. Not through official channels."
"Which is why I am going to conduct this investigation privately, at least initially. I have friends in the department, men I trust who owe me favors. I also have contacts among the newspaper reporters, people who would love nothing more than to expose corruption among the city's elite. If I can gather enough evidence, I can force the department to act, regardless of Thornwood's influence. And if you fail, if they discover what you are doing before you have enough proof—"
James met her gaze steadily. "Then I will likely lose my position and possibly face criminal charges myself. But I am willing to take that risk, Rosalind. Some things are more important than career or personal safety. Justice is one of them. You are another." The last words slipped out before he could stop them, revealing more than he had intended. Rosalind's eyes widened, and a faint color rose in her pale cheeks. For a moment the small room seemed to shrink around them, filled with an intensity that had nothing to do with stolen contracts or criminal conspiracies. "James," she said softly, "you barely know me. Why would you risk everything for someone you met only yesterday?" He set down his own cup and leaned forward, his gray eyes intense. "Because yesterday, when I read that note, when I saw the fear and courage fighting in your eyes, something changed for me. I have been a detective for 8 years, Rosalind. I have seen countless victims, helped solve dozens of cases, but never have I met anyone who affected me the way you do. There is a strength in you, a dignity that all your suffering has not diminished. You deserve to be protected, to be cherished, not hunted like an animal." Rosalind's breath caught, and tears glimmered in her eyes, though she fought them back. "I do not know what to say. You do not need to say anything. Just trust me and let me help you. That is enough." A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the sounds of the city waking outside. Horses' hooves on cobblestones, vendors calling their wares, the distant whistle of a train. Finally, Rosalind stood, smoothing her borrowed dress. "Then let us begin. What do you need me to do?" James stood as well, falling into the familiar rhythm of planning an investigation. "I need you to stay here where you are safe. Mrs. O'Brien will look after you, and I will return as soon as I can. I am going to South Station first to retrieve the contracts. Then I will begin making inquiries about the missing women. I should come with you. I know what to look for in the contracts, and I might recognize details about the women's cases that you would miss." "Absolutely not. It is too dangerous. If Thornwood has people watching the station, he does not know I took the contracts. As far as he is concerned, Sanders is the only one who knows they are missing, and Sanders believes it was a random theft. Besides, I will not sit idle while you take all the risks. We are in this together, James. You said so yourself." James wanted to argue, every protective instinct screaming at him to keep her hidden and safe, but the determination in her eyes, the set of her jaw, told him that arguing would be futile. More than that, she was right. Her insights could prove invaluable.
"Very well," he conceded. "But you stay close to me at all times, and if I tell you to run, you run without question. Agreed?" "Agreed." They took a hansom cab to South Station, a massive Romanesque structure that served as the gateway to Boston's rail connections with the rest of New England. The morning rush was in full swing, the great hall echoing with the sounds of hundreds of travelers, the hiss of steam engines, the calls of porters and conductors. The smell of coal smoke and humanity hung thick in the air. James kept Rosalind close as they navigated through the crowds to the bank of storage lockers along the north wall. She produced the key, and James opened locker 147 to reveal a leather portfolio tied with string. His hands closed around it with a sense of triumph. "Quickly now," he murmured, tucking the portfolio inside his coat. "Let us get out of here before—" "Detective Montgomery! What a surprise to find you here." James's blood ran cold. He turned slowly to find Charles Sanders approaching through the crowd, his expression one of calculated friendliness that did not reach his eyes. Behind him walked two large men in cheap suits, clearly hired muscle. "Mr. Sanders," James said evenly, positioning himself slightly in front of Rosalind. "I might say the same. Business at the station this morning?" "One might say that." Charles's gaze slid past James to Rosalind, and recognition dawned in his eyes. "And our missing laundress. How fortuitous. You know, Father was quite distressed when Whitmore reported that she had left in the middle of the night. Quite distressed indeed, especially when we discovered that certain documents had gone missing around the same time. Miss Harper is assisting me with my investigation," James said calmly, though his mind raced through possible escape routes. "As for the documents, I suggest you take up their disappearance with the actual thief, rather than harassing innocent young women." Charles laughed, a sound without warmth. "Come now, detective, do you really expect me to believe that? The girl takes a position in our household under false pretenses, steals valuable contracts, and then disappears with you in the middle of the night. That is quite the coincidence." One of the thugs behind Charles cracked his knuckles meaningfully. James felt Rosalind tense beside him, and he gently pressed her hand, trying to reassure her while his own pulse hammered. "I am warning you, Sanders. Do not do anything foolish. We are in a public place, surrounded by witnesses." "Oh, I have no intention of doing anything here, detective. But I think you should know that my father contacted Mr. Thornwood last night. Mr. Thornwood was very interested to learn that a young woman matching a certain description had appeared in our employ. Very interested indeed. In fact, he is on his way here now. He expressed a strong desire to speak with this young lady personally." Rosalind made a small sound of fear, and James felt fury surge through him. "You sent for him." "I merely informed my father's business partner of a situation that concerned him. What he chooses to do with that information is his own affair. Though I must say the reward he is offering for the girl's return is quite substantial. My father and I are businessmen after all." James's hand moved to the revolver concealed beneath his coat, but before he could draw it, a commotion erupted near the main entrance. Shouts rang out, and the crowd parted as police officers pushed through, led by a familiar figure, Lieutenant Patrick Brennan, James's old partner and one of the few men in the department he trusted completely. "Montgomery!" Brennan called out, his Irish brogue thick with urgency. "Thank God I found you. There's something you need to know about—" He stopped short, taking in the scene. James and Rosalind backed against the lockers, Charles Sanders and his thugs blocking their path. Brennan's hand went to his own weapon. "What is going on here, Sanders?" Charles's confident expression faltered slightly. "Lieutenant Brennan, this is a private matter, a simple misunderstanding about some missing property." "It looks like intimidation to me," Brennan said coldly. He was a big man, nearly as tall as James, and considerably broader, with the weathered face of someone who had worked the roughest neighborhoods in Boston. "I suggest you and your companions move along before I decide to arrest you for harassment." "On what grounds?" "We are simply having a conversation." "On the grounds that I am a lieutenant of police and you are a civilian with a history of questionable business practices. Now move, or I will make you move." Charles Sanders clearly wanted to argue, but the sight of Brennan's hand on his pistol, combined with the gathering crowd of curious onlookers, made him reconsider. "This is not over, Montgomery. Mr. Thornwood will want to speak with you about this matter." "I look forward to it," James replied coolly. Sanders and his men withdrew, though not without several backward glances. Once they were gone, James let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. Rosalind sagged against him, and he steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "Patrick," James said to his old partner, "your timing is impeccable as always. What brought you here?" Brennan's expression turned grim. "I came to find you because of what you asked me to look into last month, about those missing factory girls. James, I found something. Something bad.
There is a warehouse down by the docks, supposedly owned by a shipping company but barely used. Last night, acting on a tip, I went there with Officer Chen. James, we found evidence of human trafficking, signs that women had been held there against their will, transported somewhere. And we found this. He pulled a small object from his pocket, a lady's locket, silver and tarnished. When James opened it, he saw a photograph of a young woman with dark hair and bright eyes. Written on the back was a name, Sarah Brennan. Rosalind gasped. That is her. That is one of the women I told you about. Brennan looked sharply at her. You knew Sarah? She was my cousin. Disappeared 8 months ago. The department said she probably just ran off, but I never believed it. Who are you? James made quick introductions, explaining enough of Rosalind's situation that Brennan understood the stakes. His old partner's face grew darker with each revelation. So Thornwood is behind this, Brennan said when James finished. I always knew that bastard was dirty, but this... James, if what you are saying is true, we are talking about kidnapping, possibly murder, on top of smuggling and God knows what else. I know, and I have evidence. James patted the portfolio hidden in his coat. Contracts that may prove the smuggling operation, but we need more before we can move against him. We need to find out where those women were taken, and we need proof that Thornwood ordered it. Then we work together, Brennan said firmly. You, me, Chen, and whoever else we can trust. We build this case brick by brick until it is so solid that not even Thornwood's money can tear it down. A train whistle screamed, sharp and urgent, and James glanced at the station clock. We need to leave here. Sanders will have sent word to Thornwood by now, and I do not want to be trapped in this building when he arrives with more men. They moved quickly through the station, Brennan clearing a path with his badge and imposing presence. Outside, they piled into Brennan's police wagon with James keeping Rosalind close beside him. As they pulled away from the curb, James saw a sleek black carriage pull up to the station entrance, and a tall figure in an expensive overcoat emerged. Even from a distance, even though James had never met the man, he knew instantly who it was. Victor Thornwood. There was something in the way he moved, the way the crowd seemed to part instinctively before him, that spoke of power and menace. For just a moment, Thornwood's eyes swept the street, and James could have sworn their gazes met across the distance. Then the wagon turned a corner, and Thornwood was lost from view. Rosalind was trembling, her face pale as milk. James took her hand, no longer caring about propriety or what Brennan might think. You are safe, Rosalind. I promise you, you are safe. She looked at him with eyes full of trust and something deeper, something that made James's heart thunder in his chest. I believe you, James. But what do we do now? He knows we have the contracts. He knows where to find us. Now, James said grimly, we go on the offensive. We stop running and start hunting. Patrick, take us to your office. We have a case to build, and we have less time than I had hoped. Thornwood will move quickly now that he knows we are onto him. What about the warehouse? Brennan asked. Should we raid it? No. If we raid it now, Thornwood will know we are onto the trafficking operation, and he will destroy all evidence. Instead, we watch it. We find out who comes and goes, where the shipments are headed. And in the meantime, we analyze these contracts and find every piece of dirt we can on Sanders and Thornwood both. Rosalind squeezed his hand. And the other women, Margaret O'Connor and Anna Kowalski. If they are still alive somewhere, being held, then we will find them, James said with absolute conviction. All of them, and we will bring every person responsible for their suffering to justice. This I swear to you, Rosalind, on my honor as a detective and as a man. The wagon rattled through the streets of Boston, carrying them toward whatever fate awaited. Behind them, unseen but felt like a gathering storm, Victor Thornwood's shadow loomed. But James Montgomery had never backed down from a fight, and he was not about to start now. Not when justice demanded satisfaction, not when Rosalind's life hung in the balance, and not when his own heart had become so thoroughly, unexpectedly entangled with the brave young woman sitting beside him, her hand clasped firmly in his, their shared determination a shield against the darkness. The hunt had begun. Lieutenant Brennan's office was a cramped space in the heart of the Central Police Station on Berkeley Street, barely large enough for his desk, 2 chairs, and the towering stacks of case files that seemed to multiply like weeds. But it was private, and more importantly, it was secure. James spread the stolen contracts across the desk, while Rosalind and Brennan leaned in to examine them. The documents were dense with legal language and shipping terminology, columns of numbers and dates that would have seemed innocuous to the casual observer. But Rosalind's trained eye, honed by years of meticulous seamstress work, caught the discrepancies immediately. "Here," she said, pointing to a manifest dated 3 months prior. "This shipment is listed as textiles from Liverpool, 20 crates. But look at the weight specifications. Each crate is marked as weighing 300 pounds. James, bolts of fabric do not weigh that much, not unless they are packed with something else." James felt the familiar thrill of pieces falling into place. "What ports did these shipments go through?" Brennan traced his finger down the columns. "All of them came through Sanders's private warehouse on Atlantic Avenue, the same one where I found evidence of the women being held. My God, they are using the same location for both operations. It makes sense," James said, his mind racing. "Sanders provides the shipping infrastructure and the cover of legitimate business. Thornwood provides the capital and the political protection. Together they smuggle goods into Boston, using the women as additional cargo or perhaps as leverage against potential witnesses." Rosalind's face had gone pale. Those poor girls, treated like merchandise, shipped like animals. "How many, do you think? How many have they taken?" "I do not know," James said gently, covering her hand with his. "But we are going to find out, and we are going to stop them." A sharp knock at the door made them all freeze. Brennan's hand went to his pistol as he called out, "Who is it?" "Officer Chen, sir. I have news about the warehouse surveillance." Brennan unlocked the door to admit a young Chinese officer whose intelligent eyes took in the scene quickly. James had worked with David Chen before and trusted him as much as he trusted Brennan. Chen closed the door behind him and spoke in a low, urgent voice. "Lieutenant, there has been activity at the warehouse. A ship docked at dawn, and men have been unloading crates into the building. But that is not all. I saw women being taken inside as well, perhaps 6 or 7 of them. They were bound and appeared drugged or unconscious." Rosalind gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. James felt cold fury settle in his chest. "We need to move now. If we wait, those women could be shipped out again, lost forever." "Agreed," Brennan said, already reaching for his coat. "But we need to do this right. Chen, gather every man you trust, officers who cannot be bought by Thornwood's money. Tell them to arm themselves and meet us 3 blocks from the warehouse in 30 minutes. We are going to raid that place and arrest everyone inside." "What about warrants?" Chen asked. "You know Thornwood's lawyers will tear apart anything we do without proper authorization." James straightened, his expression hardening with resolve. "Then we get authorization from someone Thornwood cannot touch. Patrick, who is the most honest judge in Boston?" "Judge Margaret Hartwell. She is tough as nails and hates corruption with a passion. But getting to her chambers at this hour—" "I will go myself," James interrupted. "I will take these contracts and Sarah Brennan's locket, and I will convince her to issue emergency warrants for the warehouse raid and for the arrests of Victor Thornwood and Richard Sanders on charges of smuggling, kidnapping, and conspiracy. Rosalind, you stay here with Officer Chen. You will be safe in the station." "No," Rosalind said firmly, rising from her chair. "I am coming with you to see Judge Hartwell. My testimony about what Thornwood did to me, about the other women who disappeared, that will help convince her. I am done hiding, James. I am done being invisible." James wanted to argue, to keep her away from any possible danger, but the fire in her extraordinary eyes stopped him. She had been a victim for too long, powerless and afraid. Now she was choosing to stand and fight, and he respected that courage too much to deny her. "Very well," he said. "But we move quickly, and we stay together." They left Brennan to organize the raid and took a police carriage to the courthouse on Pemberton Square. Judge Hartwell's chambers were in a stately building of gray stone, its halls echoing with the measured footsteps of lawyers and clerks. The judge's secretary initially tried to turn them away, insisting that Her Honor did not see anyone without an appointment. But James's badge and Rosalind's tear-stained face convinced the woman to at least announce them. Judge Margaret Hartwell was a woman in her 60s, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, her black robes giving her the appearance of a stern but fair-minded crow. She listened without interruption as James laid out the evidence. The contracts with their suspicious cargo weights, the locket belonging to Sarah Brennan found in a warehouse where women had clearly been held captive, Officer Chen's eyewitness account of more women being brought in that very morning. Then Rosalind spoke, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. telling her story of Thornwood's assault, her flight, the other women who had disappeared. She held nothing back, her dignity and pain equally evident, and James saw something shift in Judge Hartwell's stern expression. "Mr. Thornwood is a powerful man," the judge said when Rosalind finished. "He has friends in high places, including the mayor's office. If I issue these warrants and your evidence does not hold up, my career will be finished. And if you do not issue them," James said quietly, "those women in the warehouse will disappear, and more will follow them." "How many lives is your career worth, Your Honor?" It was a bold thing to say to a judge bordering on insolent, but Judge Hartwell did not flinch. Instead, she studied James for a long moment, then turned her gaze to Rosalind. "Miss Harper, you understand that if you testify against Victor Thornwood, you will be subjected to intense scrutiny. His lawyers will try to destroy your character, to paint you as a liar and a criminal. Are you prepared for that?" Rosalind lifted her chin, and in that moment, James thought she had never looked more beautiful or more courageous. "Your Honor, they have already tried to destroy me. They have already made me invisible, turned me into something less than human. But I am still here, and I will not be silent anymore. If my testimony can save even one other woman from what I endured, then yes, I am prepared for whatever comes." Judge Hartwell nodded slowly, then reached for her pen. "Very well. I will issue warrants for the raid of the warehouse and for the arrests of Victor Thornwood and Richard Sanders. God help us all if this goes wrong, but God help us more if we do nothing. The warrants will be ready in 20 minutes. Those 20 minutes felt like hours. James paced the corridor outside the judge's chambers while Rosalind sat on a wooden bench, her hands folded in her lap. Finally, James could stand it no longer. He sat beside her, taking her hand in both of his. "Rosalind," he said softly, "when this is over, when Thornwood and Sanders are behind bars and you are truly safe, I need to tell you something." She turned to him, her ocean-colored eyes searching his face. "What is it, James?" "I have been a detective for 8 years. I have dedicated my life to justice, to protecting the innocent and punishing the guilty. But somewhere along the way, I forgot what it was I was fighting for. I became hardened, cynical, going through the motions without feeling the weight of what I did. And then I met you." He paused, struggling to find the right words. "You reminded me why I became a detective in the first place. Not for glory or advancement, but because people deserve to be protected. They deserve to matter. You matter, Rosalind. You matter more to me than any case I have ever worked, and what I feel for you goes far beyond professional duty." Rosalind's breath caught, tears glistening in her eyes. "James, The door to Judge Hartwell's chambers opened, and her secretary emerged with a sheaf of official documents. "Detective Montgomery, the warrants are ready." James took the papers with hands that were not quite steady, then turned back to Rosalind. "We will finish this conversation later. Right now, we have women to save and criminals to arrest." They raced back to the warehouse district in the police carriage, the warrants clutched in James's hand like holy relics. Brennan and his team were waiting 3 blocks from the target, a dozen good officers armed with rifles and pistols, their faces grim with purpose. "We have the warrants," James announced, distributing copies to Brennan and the squad leaders. Judge Hartwell was very specific in her instructions. "We are to secure all persons found on the premises, seize all cargo and documents, and use whatever force is necessary to protect the captive women. Gentlemen, Victor Thornwood and Richard Sanders believe they are above the law. Today, we prove them wrong." A ragged cheer went up from the assembled officers. James insisted that Rosalind remain in the carriage with 2 guards, and though she protested, she finally agreed when he pointed out that her presence during the actual raid could complicate any future trial. "I will come back for you," he promised, kissing her hand in a gesture that felt entirely natural despite its intimacy. "I swear it." Then he was moving with Brennan and Chen at the head of the assault team, advancing on the warehouse through the forest of shipping crates and cargo containers that lined the docks. The building loomed before them, a massive structure of brick and timber with few windows and a single large entrance facing the water. Brennan counted down with his fingers. 3, 2, 1. Then they hit the door with a battering ram, the wood splintering as officers poured inside with weapons drawn and voices shouting orders. The scene inside was worse than James had imagined. The main floor of the warehouse was filled with crates marked with Sanders's shipping company logo, but several had been pried open to reveal not textiles but casks of illegal spirits and boxes of prohibited goods from Europe. and in a partitioned area at the back, he found them. 11 women, ranging in age from perhaps 16 to 30, huddled together on filthy mattresses, their wrists bound with rope, their faces hollow with fear and hunger. "Get the medics!" James shouted, holstering his pistol and rushing to the women. "It is all right. You are safe now. We are police officers. You are safe." Some of them wept. Others simply stared in blank disbelief, as if they could not quite accept that their nightmare was ending. James and Chen worked to cut their bonds while other officers secured the warehouse workers who had been guarding them. 2 of the guards tried to run and were tackled before they reached the door. "Margaret O'Connor?" James called out as he helped the women to their feet. "Anna Kowalski? Are either of you here?" A thin woman with red hair raised a trembling hand. "I am Margaret. Oh God, I thought I would die in this place. He said no one would ever find us, that no one cared about girls like us." "He was wrong," James said firmly, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "Someone cared. Someone fought for you, and you are going home." Brennan appeared at his elbow, his face flushed with triumph. "James, we found Sanders in an office upstairs trying to burn documents. We stopped him in time and have him in custody. No sign of Thornwood yet, but based on the shipping logs we found, he is scheduled to arrive within the hour to inspect the cargo. Then we wait for him," James said. "We set a trap and we take him when he walks through that door." They cleared the women out first, loading them into waiting carriages to be taken to the hospital and given medical attention. Margaret O'Connor, despite her weakened state, insisted on speaking with James before she left. "There was another girl," she said urgently. "Anna Kowalski. She was with us until 2 days ago. They took her somewhere else. Said she was being shipped to New York. Please, you have to find her." "I will," James promised. "I will find her and bring her home. You have my word." After the women were safely away, James positioned his officers throughout the warehouse, hidden behind crates and in the shadows of the upper gallery. Then they waited, the tension thick enough to taste. An hour passed, then another. James was beginning to wonder if Thornwood had somehow gotten wind of the raid, when the sound of carriage wheels on cobblestones echoed from outside. A moment later, the warehouse door opened, and Victor Thornwood strode inside, flanked by 2 bodyguards. In person, Thornwood was even more imposing than James had imagined, tall and broad-shouldered, with silver-streaked dark hair and the kind of chiseled features that belonged on Roman statues. He wore a coat that probably cost more than James earned in 3 months, and he carried himself with the absolute confidence of a man who had never been told no. "Sanders!" he called out, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "Where are you? We need to discuss the Boston shipment before—" James stepped out from behind a crate, his pistol drawn and leveled at Thornwood's chest. "Victor Thornwood, you are under arrest for smuggling, kidnapping, conspiracy, and assault. Put your hands in the air." For just a moment, genuine shock registered on Thornwood's face. Then it hardened into cold fury as police officers emerged from all sides, surrounding him and his bodyguards. The guards reached for their weapons, but found themselves facing a dozen rifles. "I would not, gentlemen," Brennan said calmly. "Drop your guns and put your hands up, or we will drop you where you stand." The bodyguards, seeing they were hopelessly outnumbered, complied. But Thornwood himself seemed unable to accept what was happening. "Do you have any idea who I am? I will have your badges for this, all of you. I will see you ruined, imprisoned, destroyed. You will see nothing from inside a jail cell," James said, approaching with handcuffs. "Which is where you are going to spend the rest of your miserable life. On what charges? You have nothing. Whatever lies that Harper girl told you. We have the women you kidnapped, alive and ready to testify. We have your shipping records documenting smuggled goods. We have Richard Sanders in custody, and I guarantee he will talk to save his own skin. And we have this." James pulled out Sarah Brennan's locket, letting it dangle from his fingers. "This belonged to Sarah Brennan, one of the women you made disappear. We found it in this warehouse, along with evidence that at least 11 other women were held here against their will. How many more, Thornwood? How many women did you hurt, kidnap, or kill?" Something flickered in Thornwood's eyes then, something that might have been fear, but his voice remained defiant. "I want my lawyer. I'm not saying another word without my lawyer present." "That is your right," James said, snapping the handcuffs closed around Thornwood's wrists with deep satisfaction. "But your lawyers cannot save you this time. Judge Hartwell has already signed the warrants. and she is not the kind of woman who can be intimidated or bought. You are finished, Thornwood. Your reign of terror is over. As officers led Thornwood and his men away, Brennan clapped James on the shoulder. We did it. By God, James, we actually did it. We brought down Victor Thornwood. We are not finished yet, James said, his jaw set with determination. Margaret O'Connor said Anna Kowalski was shipped to New York. I need to send a telegram to the New York Police Department immediately. Have them search for her before she is moved again. I will handle that, Chen volunteered. You should go. There is someone waiting for you who deserves to hear the good news from you personally. James found Rosalind still in the carriage where he had left her, pacing anxiously despite the guard's assurances that everything was under control. The moment she saw him emerging from the warehouse, she ran to him, propriety forgotten, and threw herself into his arms. Is it true? She asked breathlessly, her face pressed against his chest. Did you really arrest him? Is it really over? James wrapped his arms around her, holding her close, feeling the trembling of her small frame against him. It is true. Thornwood is in custody, along with Sanders and all their men. We found 11 women alive in that warehouse, Rosalind. 11 women who would have disappeared forever if you had not been brave enough to hide that note in your coat, if you had not trusted me with your story. She pulled back to look up at him, tears streaming down her face, but they were tears of relief and joy now, not fear. Those women are safe because of you, James. You risked everything to save them, to save me. No, he said gently, brushing the tears from her cheeks with his thumbs. We saved them together. Your courage, your refusal to give up even when the world tried to make you invisible, that is what made this possible. You are the bravest person I have ever known, Rosalind Harper. She laughed then, a sound of pure happiness that seemed to light up the gray Boston afternoon. I was so afraid. For so long I was so afraid. And now, for the first time in 2 years, I feel like I can breathe again. James cupped her face in his hands, his gray eyes intense as they searched hers. Rosalind, earlier today I tried to tell you something. May I finish now? She nodded, her own eyes shining with an emotion that made his heart race. I told you that meeting you changed me, reminded me why I do this work. But it is more than that. In these past 2 days, I have come to care for you in a way I have never cared for anyone. You are brilliant and strong and beautiful, and when I think about my future, I cannot imagine it without you in it. I know it is too soon. I know you have been through hell and need time to heal, but I needed you to know. I am falling in love with you, Rosalind. Deeply, truly, completely. Her breath caught, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks, but she was smiling, a radiant smile that transformed her entire face. James Montgomery, you impossible, wonderful man. How can you not see that I have been falling in love with you too? From the moment you believed me when no one else would. From the moment you looked at me and saw someone worth protecting instead of someone invisible. You gave me back my life, my dignity, my hope. How could I not love you? And then they were kissing, there in the shadow of the warehouse where so much darkness had dwelt. A kiss that tasted of salt and joy and the promise of new beginnings. The guards politely looked away, giving them this moment of privacy amid the chaos. When they finally parted, both breathless and smiling, James rested his forehead against hers. I know this is not exactly romantic, proposing in a shipyard with the smell of the harbor all around us. But Rosalind Harper, when your heart has healed from all you have endured, when you are ready, would you consider becoming my wife? Yes, she said without hesitation, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, 1,000 times yes. But James, my heart is already healing. You are the reason why. You and your kindness, your courage, your absolute refusal to let evil win. I do not need time to know that I want to spend my life with you. They kissed again, longer this time, and when they finally climbed into the carriage to return to Brennan's office, they sat close together, hands intertwined, planning a future that had seemed impossible just days ago. The trial of Victor Thornwood and Richard Sanders took place 3 months later, in the spring of 1896. The courtroom was packed with reporters and spectators, all eager to see the mighty brought low. Judge Hartwell presided, her stern presence keeping order as witness after witness took the stand. Margaret O'Connor testified about her kidnapping and imprisonment. The other rescued women told similar stories, their voices growing stronger as they realized they were being heard and believed. The shipping records and ledgers laid out a pattern of smuggling that had been ongoing for years, costing the government thousands in lost tariff revenue. And Rosalind testified about Thornwood's assault, about the other women who had disappeared, about the terror that had driven her into hiding. She spoke with quiet dignity, never wavering even when Thornwood's expensive lawyers tried to intimidate her. James sat in the gallery, his eyes never leaving her face, silently sending her strength. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Both Thornwood and Sanders were found guilty on all counts. Thornwood received 20 years in prison, Sanders 15. Their business empires were dismantled, their assets seized to compensate their victims. But perhaps the sweetest victory came 2 weeks before the trial, when the New York Police Department located Anna Kowalski in a tenement in Brooklyn, held captive by associates of Thornwood's trafficking ring. She was malnourished and traumatized, but alive, and James personally escorted her back to Boston to be reunited with her family. On a warm May morning, with apple blossoms drifting like snow through the air, James Montgomery and Rosalind Harper were married in a small church in the North End. Lieutenant Brennan served as best man. Judge Hartwell attended, despite her usual avoidance of social functions, and the rescued women whom Rosalind had helped save filled the pews, their presence a testament to the power of courage and compassion. Mrs. O'Brien wept happily throughout the ceremony, and afterward proclaimed it the finest wedding she had ever witnessed. The reception was held in a modest hall, nothing like the grand society events that filled the newspapers, but the love and joy in that room was worth more than all the champagne and caviar in Boston. As the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, James led his bride in their first dance as husband and wife. Rosalind wore a simple but elegant dress of cream-colored silk that she had sewn herself, her dark hair crowned with apple blossoms, her extraordinary eyes shining with happiness. "Are you happy?" James asked softly as they swayed to the music. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Rosalind replied, resting her head against his chest. "I keep thinking about that night in the Sanders mansion when I dropped that note and thought my life was over. I never imagined it was actually just beginning. We both began new lives that night," James said, pressing a kiss to her hair. "You taught me to see the invisible, to fight for those the world overlooks. You made me a better man, Rosalind Montgomery." She smiled at the sound of her new name. "And you taught me that I was never truly invisible, that I always mattered. You gave me back my voice, my strength, my belief in justice. We saved each other, James. That we did, my love. That we did." They danced on as the spring light turned golden, two souls who had found each other in the darkness and built something beautiful from the ashes of trauma and fear. Around them, their friends and the women they had saved celebrated not just a wedding, but a victory over evil, a triumph of courage over cruelty. And somewhere in the state prison, Victor Thornwood sat in a cell that was very small indeed, finally learning what it meant to be invisible and powerless, while the woman he had tried to destroy danced in the arms of the man who had chosen to see her, to believe her, to love her. Justice, it seemed, had a poetry all its own. In the years that followed, James and Rosalind became advocates for victims of trafficking and assault, using their experience to push for stronger laws and better protection for vulnerable women. Rosalind opened a home for young women fleeing dangerous situations, providing them with shelter, training, and most importantly, the belief that they mattered and deserved better. James continued his work as a detective, but now with Rosalind as his partner in the truest sense, her insights and understanding of the criminal underworld proving invaluable in case after case. Together, they became a force for good in Boston, proof that even the darkest situations could give birth to light. And on quiet evenings when the work was done and they sat together in their modest but comfortable home, Rosalind would sometimes take out that crumpled note she had hidden in her coat so long ago, the note that had changed both their lives forever. "Should we frame it?" James would tease, and she would laugh and shake her head. "No, let it stay as it is. A reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of courage can change everything. That sometimes being seen is all it takes to begin the journey toward healing, and that love, true love, can find us even in our darkest hours." And James would pull her close and kiss her, grateful every day for the note, for the courage, for the love that had brought them together and would keep them together for all the years to come. Their story was not one of fantasy or magic, but of something far more powerful. The very real magic of human compassion, of justice pursued against impossible odds, and of two hearts that refused to surrender to darkness. It was a story that deserved to be told and remembered and celebrated, and so it was.